Hello and welcome to Dolby Atmos Music Spotlight featuring Kiss Nuka and John Luce. The two have recently collaborated to bring you Mahamrityunjaya Mantra for the first time in Dolby Atmos, with which you discover surprising new details in the songs you love. Songs can now be heard and felt all around you, unlocking new levels of emotion and drawing you closer to the artists you love. Let me introduce you to our guests on the show right away. Kiss Nuka is the new avatar of Anushka Manchanda, a revered voice in the Indian music industry. She is a global award-winning music producer of Indian descent. She fearlessly blends genres, creating uncensored and immersive audiovisual experiences like Shed My Skin. She was one of the first independent artists to adopt to Dolby Atmos for music with Kashmir and now Mahamrityunjaya Mantra. John Luce, director of audio production at Dolby, has been developing marketing content for cinema, TV, and music for over 25 years. He is a conservatory trained percussionist who studied Indian music. Yeah, that's right. That's tabla and kanjira for more than 30 years. He played on 40 CDs as a hand percussionist before joining Dolby and toured the world for 10 years. He comes to mixing from a musician's perspective first, as opposed to an engineer. So that will be interesting. Welcome to both of you. So my first question is to Kiss Nuka, whom I've known all my life as Anushka, followed her career, and it's certainly been a very passionate journey she's had through the years. I think it was about 2001, 2002, when I saw her first, when I was a journalist at CNBC. So what's with your new brand identity? Can you tell us a bit more?
It's such a long story, but I'm going to tell you in a nutshell. First of all, I really appreciate that you said that. I am so grateful actually to have people who have known me for all of this time. I consider myself really lucky to still be, after it's almost now 20 years, to still be a part of this industry, and very excited about evolving. I found myself in this indie pop and then Bollywood, and just completely by accident. And I always wanted to go back to do something that was my own, independently. I realized at the beginning of my career, I was very happy to do all of the work that I was getting. I learned a lot. But slowly in the last years, I realized, that none of this work is really mine. And I wanted to create something of my own. I also had a lot to say. I have a lot to say. There are things that are very important to me. And I realized that I'm super lucky because I have a tool to be able to put my message out there. And I want to make the most of that because that is my purpose on this planet. So that's the kind of short, not really that short answer to this question. And that's why Kiss Nuka. That's why I have this new identity, because I wanted to create something of my own that meant something, that could do something, that could say something. That's it. Yeah.
Fantastic. So Anushka, John says, I read a line of his where he says that, he really does mixing, approaches mixing from a musician's perspective first, since he is a trained musician as opposed to an engineer. And that because he was on the other side of the glass for many years before he really started mixing and engineering. How was it like to work with him?
I think there's so much of value in what John has said. I have just started recording other artists in the studio, and I was always being recorded, and it's I have so much of insight, and I'm able to guide the session so well because I've been on the other side, and I feel like mixing is one of the most important ingredients in a song. Of course, it has been really amazing because I knew that my track was in good hands. And even though John was so far away, I was like, okay, here is a person who is a musician with so much of experience. I trust him. And I
We
was
hit
right.
it off pretty quickly. I think in our first couple of video calls, it was clear that we were cut from the same cloth.
Anushka, coming to some technical questions now. You are one of the first independent artists to adopt to Dolby Atmos for music with Kashmir, and now Mahamrityunjaya Mantra. Why did you do this? Obviously, technology, but why did you make this decision, and how has it been? What are your learnings?
As a producer now, over the last years, I have realized how important it is for all the elements to be in perfect balance with each other, all the sounds to have their own space. And we work so hard, to make sure that I'm still not a mixing engineer. And I think that it's like one of the biggest drawbacks right now that I have. And I do want to learn, and I will learn. But it's so important, we spend so much time actually, putting this together, and then someone will listen to it on like really bad speakers
These.
or
Yeah.
or on their phone, on the laptop, and you're like, oh my God, this is so heartbreaking, because you put so much of effort into it. When I heard about Dolby, well, I heard about Dolby until I really experienced it. So all I knew was that there's this new technology, and you feel like you're in this 3D environment, and it's around your head. And I was like, okay, all of that sounds really cool. I want to be in the middle of this sound. But it was only when I actually heard the first mix of Kashmir that I realized what it's about. I took the chance to go for it because I knew that I know of Dolby's reputation for sound, and I understood that if Dolby is offering this kind of a new way of listening to sound, I want to be on that bus, definitely. I don't know how it's going to sound, but I want to be on this bus to get there first to find out. And when I received the first mix of Kashmir, I was like, oh my God, I can hear everything. All of these beautiful little sounds that could get lost in a stereo mix. Like there was just so much more space. Like I felt like I could swim in it. I was like, this is just amazing. And that was it. And a lot of people asked me after, a lot of musician friends of mine, they were like, is it just like a gimmick? And I was like, no man, you got to check it out. And then we talk about it. And I was still only listening on headphones, I was then able to go to the Dolby studio and actually sit and watch the process of how this is done. I was very intrigued by the software, and also I was able to then listen to it in the surround sound setup. So I was right.
Right. And you saw that, you can listen to it on something that's, not the best quality headphones, and you still get a pretty nice experience. But the better system that you get, no matter what happens, the quality of the sound and the sound itself expands and scales.
Yeah.
So when you listen to it in a great room with lots and lots of speakers, it sounds absolutely amazing. But you can also get a really good experience out of even simple headphones.
Yeah.
And I think you nailed it when you talked about space, because when you're mixing in Dolby Atmos, you don't mix to like this flat plane. You're mixing to the space. And because every sound can have a place in 3D space that's always memorized, so that 3D position stays with the sound its whole life through the process, then when you play it back, it's playing it to exactly the same space as we said it's going to go to. And that's a really different way of thinking.
Right. And the imagery is also brilliant, isn't it? That she felt like she was swimming in a sea of, I guess, sound. So beautifully put there. John, how did you interpret the music in this mix to accentuate the transcendental nature of the mantra?
So I don't always do this, but when I first heard the stereo version, I immediately started drawing pictures of where I thought things should be. And the very first thing that I drew was this notion of there's a kalimba part that's the ostinato that continues da 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 dee, da 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 dee, that goes through the piece. And I thought if there was only a way that I could make that so it felt like it was floating up and behind you. So we have this way of doing automated panning in Dolby Atmos music where you can take a beat-based pan and draw the pan how you want to hear it, and then it'll repeat on the beat. So I developed a couple of different panners that would do that, and because Kiss Nuka put some delay on this kalimba, it kind of had a little bit of a floating sound anyway. And I think one of the most interesting things about doing delay in Atmos is that when you're working with delays in stereo, they go into the speaker, right? So it's going sort of deep in front of you. That's my perspective, at least. The way that I see delay is it's going in front of you. And if you flip that behind you and take the delay returns and put them behind you, then what happens is that the sound is swimming past you, and it makes you feel like you're going deeper and deeper and deeper into the sound. And that's kind of where I was coming from with a lot of this. The static synth pads, I have these very, very slow evolving pans that kind of swim around your head. And that was kind of the basis when I first started the piece. And that kind of told me what else to do with the mix.
And John, was there something in that original mix that inspired you?
Well, first of all, the voices, the multi-tracked voice needed to sound. I wrote this down. I said this needs to sound gently powerful, because that's kind of how Kiss Nuka did it in the first place, right? It's got a lot of compression on it, so it's quite, as you would say, intense, but it's still got a softness to it. So it's very present, but it's not something that you wanted to wash out in reverb or something like that. And you didn't design the sound to sound like you were in a temple in a giant stone room. It's much more intimate than that. So the way that I approached the other instruments were thinking about this as if you were sitting down and the violinist, for instance, instead of typically sitting down on the floor and just playing, I have that extremely slowly, like he or she is walking around in front of you. So, if you listen carefully, it's just sort of this very gentle, slow walk that takes about 4 bars to get back to the beginning. And I think the pace of that works nicely with the way that the mantra is shaped. So, I hope you liked that part, didn't you, Nuka? I thought
I loved it. I was like, what is happening?
It's non-traditional, that's for sure.
But that's what's also so amazing, I think, because it is, these mantras have been done 1,000 times before, and so I really appreciate actually taking a look at it, not in a traditional way. I think that's also the beauty of it.
So what was your reaction from the time you sent the original stereo mix and what came back to you? What was your initial reaction? How did you feel?
We had talked quite a bit about it. And so it was really interesting for me. I was also conscious of the fact that, we were far away from each other.
A number of revisions back and forth. And that's the way that things work. It's just as if you and I were in the studio, we would be having these discussions. Unfortunately, here we are, we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're 3,000 kilometers away, 10,000 kilometers away.
No, but it was amazing.
This is what we have to do, right?
John, I have got one of these technical questions that I have to ask you for the benefit of our viewers, because, I guess many aspiring mix engineers and musicians would like to know this, and a lot of us don't understand. What does a mix engineer do? So
the way that a mixing engineer approaches something, and what we do is we listen to all of the separate tracks that make up a song, listen to them individually, understand where they live in the context of the song, what should be louder, what should be quieter, what frequencies need to be boosted, what need to be cut. And, in England, they call them balance engineers because you're balancing things. And that's basically what I do as well. So I'm making sure that things are balanced. And I think one of the things that I do when I approach an Atmos mix is that I listen very carefully to somebody's rough mix that they've done at home to know what stuff they're emphasizing and what they're putting in the background. And that's the most important thing, because with Atmos, you can take something that's been emphasized in the stereo and make it bigger, or make it move, or bring attention to it in some other way. So what the mix engineer really is doing is shifting your attention from one thing to another as the song progresses, and doing it in hopefully a nice, balanced, tasteful way.
Right. So, because I love music, so I've spent a ton on this audio system at home, and I usually upgrade it. For people who are on smartphones, for people who have expensive headphones, how does Dolby Atmos enhance the experience?
Okay, so when you're listening to a Dolby Atmos mix in headphones, there's a virtualization process. And that virtualization process works so that it's using different kinds of time delays in between the two headphone channels to trick your brain into making you feel like something is above you or behind you or anywhere in between. So because Dolby has been studying this for 50 years, we've been studying how people hear. We understand how to do these virtualization techniques where we can take somebody's spatial mix that has objects that are placed at different parts in space and map those to even virtual speakers. So if you listen, for instance, to Apple Music on a new MacBook Pro, then the speakers have a virtualization in them as well. So you will actually hear things that feel like they're above your laptop, floating above your laptop. And when you're listening to headphones, you'll also get that same kind of experience.
Right. And Nuka, since you are one of the first independent artists, producer, composer, a singer to adopt to Dolby Atmos, what does it mean to you? And what is the kind of scope that you look at for other artists as well?
I have actually had such an amazing experience with the Dolby team, and it has been it has really felt like teamwork, and that's what I really appreciate. I feel like for all artists, collaboration is the way to move forward for all of us around the world, and that means collaborating with each other, collaborating with new technologies, collaborating with it's new ideas. And I think that this is, for me, this is one of the most important things. It's not always just about the end product. It's also about the experience attached to it. It's also about the journey that helps you get there. And this is something that I feel I have experienced with Dolby. Obviously, I think I'm really cool because I was the first indie artist to do it. And it's always nice to be able to say that. But I do think when I talk about, I would like to be a tech-forward artist. But what does that mean? This is what it means. To be able to explore and experiment and adapt to new technologies as they come in, to just make everything better, to make the quality better. It's a no-brainer. And so obviously I feel very cool.
Yeah, I think with the subtleties are the things that we can bring out. So I can tell you, working on some other, American pop stars' work, I'll sometimes get 100 vocal tracks. And some of them are just very, very subtle, tiny little bits of delay return, or or they'll just be a word, or whatever, but different, 100 passes of vocals. And, normally in stereo, those just get squashed together. But I'm able to spread them out in a way that you can sort of feel each one of those 100 tracks. And I think, as you go forward, I would encourage you to think about the subtle things that we can make come alive in Atmos.
John, one final question to you. What would you want to tell young music mix engineers about the possibilities with Dolby Atmos?
I think the one thing that I would encourage young engineers to do, if they want to learn how to mix in Atmos, is to download the tools. You can actually get a 30-day free trial, I believe, of the Dolby Atmos renderer and the plugins. You're no longer required to use Pro Tools. You can use Ableton or Nuendo or Logic, and explore how to do it. And you can do it in headphones and get a really good understanding of how the system works just by beginning to work in headphones. And, of course, during the pandemic, I'm stuck in my studio here at home, working on headphones most of the time. I've got 5 feet away here, I've got a big Atmos home theater that I can play stuff back in, but I'm mostly mixing in headphones. And then when I do a release product like this for Kiss Nuka, I'll go into my studio and master it in the proper room. But there's a ton of pre-production that I can do here at home, and I encourage young engineers just to try to jump in, because I approach it from somebody who's been mixing for a long time, and I think somebody that's just starting will have maybe a completely different approach to things, and probably more wild than me. And I'm known as the one that kind of pushes it a little bit further than a lot of people. I'll push things until people say, "Hey, wait a minute, that's too much."
Right. With that, we come to the end of this conversation. We run out of time. It's been delightful talking to you, Kiss Nuka. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And John, fantastic insights. Thank you so much. I guess many youngsters learned a lot from you today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It was fun to work on this project.
So remember, with Dolby Atmos, individual elements of a song are heard and felt from all around. Your music experience is now richer and fuller. You'll be more connected to your music and feelings. So do experience Kiss Nuka's Mahamrityunjaya Mantra like never before on Dolby Atmos.
Trayambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivardanam urvarukamiv bandhanan mrityormukshiyamamratat.